introduce myself. You don't know who I am, but I'm Ken. And I'm going to read from the Living Version today, and it is in Romans 12, the first 8 verses. Quite intriguing. So, my dear brothers, I plead with you that you give your bodies to God, that let them be a living sacrifice, holy, the kind he can accept. Then when you think of what he has done for us, is it too much to ask? Don't copy the behavior and customs of the world, but be a new and different person with a fresh newness in all that you do and think. Then you will learn from your own experience how his ways really bring satisfaction to you. As God's messenger, I give each of you God's warning. Be honest in your estimates of one another, measuring your value of how much faith God has given you. Just as there are many parts of our body, so it is with Christ's body. We are all parts of it, and it takes every one of us to make it complete. For we each have different work to do. We belong to each other, and each other's needs are ours. God has given each of us an ability to do certain things well, each of us. So if God has given you ability to prophesy, then prophesy. If he's given you the gift of serving, serve others. If you're a teacher, do it. If you're a preacher, preach it. If God has given you money, be generous. If God has given you ministries of abilities, put you in charge of a work, take responsibility seriously. Those who offer comfort to sorrowing people should do this with Christian cheer. Giftings. He's talking about giftings, but I'm going to do something interesting. I'm going to talk about 2 or 3 verses. We know all about giftings, and then I'm going to actually have a bit of theology. How about that? You lovely theology. So that's what I'm going to do for a couple of minutes. And then I'm going to deal with 2 issues of something like 100 million years before now. How about that? So it's quite exciting, isn't it? I hope. Right, let me get my notes out and see what we can do. Right. Paul's first bit here is quite intriguing. He's changing his tack, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But he says, look, I plead with you. And the other versions say, I urge you. What does he urge you to? To be a living sacrifice. In another version, it says, I beg you. So he's been very, very strong here. So he said, I beg you, I urge you, I appeal to you to be a living sacrifice. Now, the thing about a sacrifice is you die. You don't have this, you don't do that, and etc., etc. But he said, now, I'm going to ask you to be a living sacrifice, i.e., although you're full of life, you've actually given your life to Jesus. Paul turns it round. It's a living, it's a possibility that seems negative. But actually, he says, this, if you are a living sacrifice, you actually, when you work on it, you'll find it satisfying because you'll feel that you're working the same pattern as God is, that you're on the same wavelength, that your heart is filled with the same desires that God is, and he then gives you grace to be able to do it. So he said, don't copy the world's behaviors and customs. They seemingly seem good, but be a different person noticeably. You will experience, he says in this passage, a fresh newness in doing what you do. He actually says a fresh newness, and that is what God gives you. He does recreate things in you and gives you a fresh newness. It's not the world's way of doing it. There is a depth of the Spirit in this. This practice produces a deep satisfaction, but it needs commitment. This chapter is dealing, well, from this chapter onward, it's dealing with a new subject, because up till now, he's been talking about justification. The fact is that you have been basically, yes, justification, just as if I'd never sinned. And it's a scandal, because basically God's saying, you come to me and I'll forgive you. But as a sinner, you've been acquitted, which seems totally wrong. But God's done it. He's acquitted you. He said, look, it's free. So that Paul earlier in in chapter 6 or something, he says, but I can go on sinning, can't I? But of course you can't. But the argument is that you can go on sinning and you can still keep coming back. But then you see, as we progress through this gospel, we get to the second great truth. There's three great truths here. The second great truth, which is sanctification. And there we are open to God to be set apart. This is where we're now. He's now telling us there's things we need to do. He implants in us principles of his kingdom. So so there's something from the first bit. We then move on to this second bit, which then he spends the chapters talking about a bit more, where he plants things in our lives which actually bring us closer to God. And the good summary of it, of course, is Galatians 6:22. He puts the opportunity to bring joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. The fruits of the Spirit, we have to work on them. There's no question about this. He's forgiven us. We're free, but he wants the depth. He wants his character to be built in us so that we are living Jesus's, living Christ's. You see, there's in 1 Peter, it says, now you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, so that we may declare the praises of him who called us out of the world's darkness into his most wonderful light. That's what he says. That's what our opportunity should be. So there's this wonderful light which should be burning within our hearts. The third truth, by the way, if you're at it after sanctification, the second truth is glorification, which basically when we die, we're with God in the fullness of him. So that's the kind of theology, a quick note of theology. Now I'm going to finish with something which is quite intriguing. I'm going to compare two different scenarios, and I'm only doing this because I want to discover something about the universe, because that's what we do here. So I want to tell you about something that happened in down in Winchcombe, where I was staying in February. Now, what actually happened was that in February this year in Winchcombe, near Cheltenham, for the first time in 25 years, a meteorite fell in the drive of a property of someone less than 10 minutes walk from where I was. And the final part, they're very clever. In Glasgow, they have a kind of setup, a scientific setup looking at everything in the stars, and they can trace a meteorite when it's coming close to the Earth. So they immediately take a photograph, and they got a photograph of the thing coming along and coming into someone's drive. The next morning, the guys, this is at night time. Next morning, the guys kind of flew down from Glasgow to this house, kind of as fast as they possibly could, to find this. And all it looked like, because it was rocky, it had broken into pieces, and actually it looked like a pile of dog's muck. It's probably a couple of pounds worth, that's all. So there it was, sitting on the drive. So these guys came down, they dug out the drive completely, took the whole lot away, leaving a great big hole, and they took it back to Glasgow. And what the in Winchcombe, the colleagues I stay with are very involved with the museum, and because the thing came down in Winchcombe, where they took it to, they decided that they would send a piece back to the museum. So the museum has a small piece in a special box, a special kind of glass container, actually, of this sitting there. It's a little tiny bit, but you've got a very big exhibition showing the system. And what actually it is, that the point being that I found it quite significant that they're talking about this can tell us things about things that happened 100 million years ago. They're so amazing. There's 3 or 4 videos that you can look at of people absolutely over the top, ecstatic, absolutely ecstatic, because they've got this from 100 million years ago, and they can see this, and they can see it's broken down this, and they've got this information, and they are absolutely, the guys are saying, I've never seen this amazing in my life, and their whole life has changed. You think, oh, really? Well, it's an intriguing exhibition, and their whole focus has been totally and utterly changed. So that is the worldview, that they are. This information is so absolutely fantastic that it just overwhelmed them. Now, I say to you an interesting fact, that God says something to us, and he says it about things that happened, say, 100 million years ago, if that's your theology. He says that before the world began, in Ephesians 1:3, God chose me, chose you to be his very own. Before the world began, he took you, he knew you, he put into you your gifts, your graces, your personality. He held on to you. Why did he hold on to you? Because the time that he wanted you to be here is now. It's utterly bizarre. It's all in God's hands. He knew you before time began. Isn't that absolutely stunning? And billions of years, I don't know how many, your theology might be whatever, but from before the world was created, you were known to God, and he put all the goodness and graciousness and power into you. You're a different personality than anyone else, but he's put together by you. He chose the best time for us, which is now. So we've come at the time he wants us to be here, which is amazing, to be his messenger. So we should be absolutely ecstatic. I mean, these guys in this video were kind of absolutely overwhelmed. This is something that is so dynamic, isn't it? He's chosen us before the foundation of the world. He's worked on us. He's put all these things within us, give us a character which is totally different from everyone else. As we were talking about every different character here, that he was saying about, you've got gifts for this, gifts for that. That is what he's done in us. And the message today is these guys were so ecstatic. Shouldn't we not be ecstatic with this reality, this certainty, and the certainty too that glorification won't be long for us, less than 100 years. None of us will be here. We'll all be with God, with Jesus, with the Lord in heaven. It's simple, but that's the fact. And it's absolutely stunning. It's ecstatic. Okay, guys, that'll do.